to be covering creating components in C++. What do I mean by this? Well, let's go and have a look at an example of an actor that has a component. If we go to the contents quests, I'm going to open up the BP quest marker. And this is a blueprint actor, and you can see here that it has a particle system as a component attached to the scene root. Go over to the viewport, you can see what this particle system looks like. And basically what we'd like to do is take this particle system and migrate it over into C++ so that the creation of the particle system is in C++ and we can access the properties from C++, we can set the properties from C++, and we can activate any kind of behavior that we need to, all from C++. Now we're going to be needing that later when we want to migrate more functionality there. So how do we create a component in C++? It's very easy in Blueprint. You go to Add Component, you select the component type you want, and you can place it in your components hierarchy. How do we do the same thing? Well, first of all, we're going to have to create a base class for our BP Quest marker because there isn't one currently. So going to go to the content browser and repeat the process we've done before. Go to Add New Class. And because the base is an actor, we're going to select actor as the base class. And then we are going to choose the folder to be quests. And we're going to name our new actor the quest marker, like so, and go ahead and create that class. Now, once that has been completed, we go over into Visual Studio and have a look at what we've got here. So we've got a U class, and if we go over to our quest marker and we want to go to our class settings, select the parent class and look for our quest marker. And find the quest marker actor right here and select it. And we've gone ahead and reparented this blueprint. I'm going to compile and save just to make sure. The next step is going to be to go through and add a U property that is going to hold our component. Because we are going to be using this property in Blueprint, it's going to be in a protected section. And we're going to want to make it Blueprint read write, basically. And for now, we are going to make it visible anywhere. And we're also going to make it blueprint read only. Now, why is it not blueprint read write? Because we don't actually want to be able to replace the component. The component is going to be created in the constructor of the actor. And it's not going to be reset at any point. You're not creating a new component. That component is now part of the actor. It is a sub-component. So what we're going to do is going to give this a name. First of all, we need to know what the type of that component is. So let's go over into Unreal and have a look how we might find that out. If we select our particle system, you can see that it is in brackets a particle system component. So I'm guessing that that is a U particle system component. And we can go and have a look in the documentation to find out that the include path that we need is going to be #include particles / particle system component.h. And the type is going to be a U particle system component. And it's going to be a pointer to the U particle system component because this is a large type and it's going to be allocated for us. And using the U property here means that it's actually going to be garbage collected for us by the Unreal system automatically. So that might surprise some of you who are into C++ and know that there's no garbage collection in C++. Well, in Unreal there is, and automatically components and actors and things, anything basically deriving from U object, the root object, can be garbage collected, and the pointers that make sure that you keep things around have to be U properties. So if you ever have a pointer to one of these objects that you're storing on your class and you want to keep that pointer around, then make sure that it is in a U property, even if you don't need any of the access modifiers. Okay, so we're going to call this simply particle system, and then we don't need to set a default value because we're going to set it up over in the constructor. So let's go over to the C++ file now, where we've got our constructor and we've got this CanEverTick property being set. Now, we don't actually need begin play or tick in this quest mark, so I'm going to remove them, and I am going to remove them also from the C++ file just to keep things a little bit simpler, but we do need our constructor. And we're going to set CanEverTick to false probably as well. We do not need to tick. And then to set up or create this subcomponent, we're going to do the following. We are going to use a function called create default subobject. Now, be warned, create default subobject can only be used inside the constructor. If you try and use it in begin play or elsewhere, that's going to be incorrect. this is not for spawning objects that happen at runtime. This is for spawning objects that are default, they're part of the object. Because remember that the constructor is called at edit time when you're running the editor, not just while the game is playing. So here in the generics, we have to put in that we want a uParticle system component that we're trying to return out of here, and then the arguments into this are an fname. So we can actually use the text macro to create an fname, and we want to give this particle system a name. So I'm going to call it the particle system for risk of repeating myself. And just to be cautious, I want to make sure this does not conflict with the component that we've got over here in Blueprint. So I'm going to call this BP underscore particle system because we're going to migrate all of its properties over to the C++ version of this component. So we want to keep it around just for now, but we don't want to create a name conflict. And I believe these components have to all be named differently. We could not go in here, go create new particle system, and we couldn't just name this BP underscore particle system because it says that it is already the name of another component in here. So we'll go ahead and delete that, because we do not need it. And we'll go back to the C++ and just finish off the job. So we want to assign the result of create default subobject to the particle system variable that we've created, that U property. And then we need to attach this component somewhere in this hierarchy of components that we've got, because it's a scene component, it's not an actor component. It needs to be attached to another scene component, or it needs to be set as the root. So that's what we're going to do in this case, at least initially, and then I will show you how we can do it differently. So we can do set root component, and then we pass in the component that we want to have as root scene component for the actor. So it's going to be the particle system. Let's go ahead and compile that and see what happens over in the Blueprint. So now you can see that at the root of our quest marker, we have got our particle system with a brackets inherited around it that says it is inherited from C++. Then it has shifted down our default scene root to be below that as a child of it, and the BP particle system is a child of that. Now I want to show you how could we actually have a different scene root and then the particle system childed to that. Now the way we have to do that is we have to create ourselves a root component as well. So let's create a new U property. And just for fun this time, let's not make it visible anywhere or Blueprint read only. And we're going to have a U scene component pointer, and we'll call this the root. And then what we're going to do is go over to the C++, and we're going to set that up. So the root is going to be equal to a create default subobject with a U scene component as the template parameter, and a name using the text macro is going to be the root scene root. And now when we set a root component, we are going to set our root as the root component. And to set up the attachment, there is a function called setup attachment. So we can do particle system arrow setup attachment, and then you tell it what you want to have as the parent, which is going to be the root. And again, setup attachment is only something you can call in the constructor. If you want to do this at runtime and set up attachments at runtime, that's a different set of functions. So after you have done that, you can go over into Unreal and have a look at the result. We've now got our root scene component up at the top level, and then the particle system childed to that. And I'd like to point out that neither of these two, when you select them, appear to have any kind of details pane. But after having made such a fundamental change to a Blueprint, it's always worth restarting the editor in case anything has been cached incorrectly. And in fact, you will notice that that has changed the hierarchy here among the components. But what it hasn't changed is that we still can't see the details. Now, in the case of the root component, this is actually because we don't have visible anywhere. And if you have visible anywhere, that means that the details of the pointer are visible to the editor. And the reason it's visible anywhere rather than edit anywhere is a bit strange, because you don't want to actually be able to change where the pointer is pointing to. You want that pointer to be only updated in the constructor and not changed anywhere else. So we don't want it edit anywhere, but we want it visible because we want to see the results at that pointer. And that, funnily enough, actually makes it editable, at least the components that are editable in the uScene component. So it then defers the visible anywhere and edit anywhere to that class that is being pointed to. And we can also make it Blueprint read-only because that doesn't hurt. Again, we don't want to be able to edit the pointer in Blueprint. We just want to be able to edit the pointer's properties. So read-only is where we go there. So if you compile that, you should go over to Blueprint and see that now if you click on that root component, you can change its details in the Detail tab. However, with the particle system, something slightly weirder is going on. You are getting some caching from the previous particle system that used to be called particle system. So the way to get around this is to just rename your particle system variable. So it's particle system 1, for example. If I do that here in the header, and I do that over in the C++ in a couple of places, and I go ahead and compile that change, then we're going to see that we can then look into the details pane. So go over to particle system 1, as it's now called, and you can see, sure enough, that in the details pane, here we are, we can see all of the particle system properties. And I can actually now go and undo that rename because it's a strange rename to leave in our code base if we don't need it. And you'll see that the particle system now works as required. So here we are, particle system inherited. If I click on it, you can see all of its details and the name is correct. So the only thing left to do now is to copy over the properties, which I'm going to do in a very manual way because that's pretty much the way that there is. You go and click on the BP particle system and you have a look at anything that has these little yellow arrows, which is telling you that this is overridden from the default of a particular particle system. There's not too many of these, so we can go ahead, right click on copy on the template and paste it over in our new particle system. And then we can do the same thing with our instance parameters, copy the instance parameters whole array and right click on the array of the other one and it'll put in all of our instance parameters. And that pretty much is the only thing that is different between these two particle systems. So I can go ahead and delete our BP particle system. But first of all, I'm just going to check that there aren't any references. Find reference. We've got a get BP particle system in a refresh visibility. So let's go into refresh visibility. You can see that we're getting the particle system. Let's instead get the non-BP particle system, the one from C++. That's why it was important that it was a Blueprint read and that we had read access to it. Let's go and find any references to the particle system now. There are none. So we can go ahead and delete, compile, save, and go and play and check that our markers are working. They're popping up in the world. We can go through them and they deactivate, which is that refreshing of visibility. Okay, hopefully you have now seen how you can set up components in C++ as well as in Blueprint. And that gives you access to those components to be able to do things such as refresh visibility from within the quest markers C++ rather than from the Blueprint.